evening and a very warm welcome to The Point. I'm Birgit and it's lovely to be with you for a program again this evening. Well, I'm very excited because tonight we're beginning a series of 4 programs on the topic of the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is a linen artefact which is located in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin in Italy, which some people believe to be the actual cloth that Jesus was buried in. But this is very controversial and not everybody agrees, so the purpose of our series is to explore this. And over the 4 programs, we're asking different questions. Firstly, what is the Shroud of Turin? Is the shroud in the Bible? Can the shroud be shown to be authenticated as the actual cloth that Jesus was buried in? And how does the Shroud of Turin scientifically verify the resurrection? So those are each of the questions for each of the 4 programs. And my co-host has spent many years studying this whole topic of the shroud. And as it's a specialist topic for him, he is going to offer us presentations on this topic. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the program our friend and my co-host, Dr. Richard Kent. Richard, welcome to The Point.
Lovely to be here and lovely for you to come back again. It's so lovely.
I'm so excited. Yeah. And I'm just so fascinated in this topic, Richard. I know that this is something that has really been an area of such intrigue for you, and you've spent many years actually looking at the authenticity of the shroud. And so even just talking with you before the programs and doing a bit of background, I learned a lot as well, and it really is quite a fascinating topic. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what you have to share. And I know that you, in this program, we're going to be looking at what the Shroud of Turin actually is. Is that correct?
Absolutely right, Birgit. Well done.
So shall we begin with, I know there's a scriptural verse that you want to begin the program with.
Very good. Yes, let's start with that.
Okay, so we're looking at John, and it's chapter 20, verses 6 and 7. So the verses read, "Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. And he saw the linen cloths lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together in a place by itself." So Richard, this is the account by John the Apostle of what was found when Peter and John himself went to the tomb. They found these 2 cloths.
Correct.
Now, the first question is, do you believe that these cloths referred to in this passage is actually the Shroud of Turin?
Absolutely. Yes, I do. Now, let me just say the Shroud of Turin is very, very controversial. 99.9% of people on planet Earth who heard about the shroud, all they know is it's a fraud. And the reason is that in 1988 it was dated in the UK and in Switzerland and in the States, and the radiocarbon dating showed that the Shroud of Turin was dated 1325, plus or minus 60 years, and of course that's a medieval date. And so despite all the other research that's been done on the shroud, people have written the shroud off as a fraud. Well, controversially, I don't believe it is a fraud. In fact, we'll come to it in the 4th program, but I believe the fact that the shroud actually is highly radioactive for a 1st century shroud actually proves the resurrection. In fact, there are 2 really important dates in my life. First of all, in 1974, when my wife and I together became believers in the Lord Jesus Christ. And the second was sitting in my own study in 2003, when after 4 years I actually worked out in my own mind, I'm quite sure the Lord would help me, actually how this image was formed. Now my views are my views. This is how I believe the image was formed at the time of the resurrection. I'm not going to insist you go along with me. I'm just going to present the evidence, and as I always do on this particular subject, is to ask viewers to make up their own minds. Because in the end, it's what people believe themselves that matters, not what they're told to believe. Do you agree with that, Birgit?
Absolutely, yes. It's just helpful having people like you that have done a lot of background research, though, to give us a bit more information.
Well, probably do interrupt any moment, but I've got some pictures to show you, so maybe we start some pictures. Shall we do that?
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, there we are. There is the picture you're probably most familiar with of of the face of the man on the shroud. We'll call him the man on the shroud. I believe it's Jesus Christ. 99.9% of planet Earth, people on planet Earth, believe that that's a fraud. Just look at that face. Just look at that face. That is a serene face of someone who's been brutally tortured and crucified. And let me tell you, that is an extraordinary picture for a whole lot of reasons. The first thing is that particular picture was taken by somebody called Secundo Pia, who was an amateur photographer, in 1898. And he was stunned when he took that photograph. I'll explain all about photo positive and photo negative later on. But he was stunned by the actual face that he saw, and many people, including me, are still stunned by that photograph. But from a scientific point of view, actually nobody can actually do that, actually create a photograph like that, because if you look at it closely, it's a black and white picture, as you can see, except for the blood from the crown of thorns look white on that, because they are actually photo negative. I'll explain that also later on today, this evening in this presentation. That is a mixture of photo positive and photo negative elements in one photograph. Now, lots of people say medieval, somebody fraudulent in the medieval times created that photograph. I don't think so, because that was 400 years before photography was discovered. And secondly, nobody on planet Earth now could make an image like that with mixed photo positive and photo negative elements. But just, Birgit, just looking at that photograph, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really taking on board what you're saying and how extraordinary it is to see in one image this combination of photo positive and photo negative. It's really quite miraculous, because unless this is a miracle, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. How can one image actually depict both those properties, photo negative and photo positive? So that in itself is an extraordinary point to begin with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's move on. Here are three very smug atheists in the next picture in the British Museum in 1988. They look actually fairly smug, frankly. They just performed carbon dating, which is the latest and greatest machine that the scientists have invented, and they came up with these dates, which you can see on the blackboard, 1260 to 1390, and they're very happy about it, because they, in their mind, have proved that the Shroud of Turin is a fraud. And as I explained to you already, that's what most people on planet Earth believe. They believe the Shroud of Turin is a fraud. Actually, unlike most other believers in the Shroud, I actually think their carbon dating was correct, that it is a radioactive shroud, but their understanding of the shroud is actually limited. I would go on to say that the Shroud of Turin is a modern-day scientific parable which only Christians, believers in the Lord Jesus and the resurrection, will ever understand. So let's look at the history of the shroud. Let's look at the next picture. Of course, taking the Jesus was crucified between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. He died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon after 6 hours, which actually was quite a short time. And that was probably because after the scourging, and he had lost a huge amount of blood, he was very weak, even before he was nailed to the cross. But he was taken down from the cross, and they had to very quickly bury him and put him in a tomb in 3 hours, because 6 o'clock in the evening signified the beginning of Shabbat, and no work to be performed on the Shabbat. So unusually, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment, they put him in a piece of very fine linen. And that's important to remember. So let's look at the next picture. There's actually no need to go to Turin Cathedral to actually see the Shroud of Turin. No reason, I actually have never been to Turin to actually see it, because the Shroud of Turin is actually all over the internet. But if you actually were to go there, what you would see is not two images side by side, but one very long piece of cloth, 14 foot 3 inches long and 3 foot 7 inches wide. Now that means nothing in today's measurements, but it's very significant that in the cubits that they used in the 1st century, ancient Syrian cubits, that was 2 cubits by 8 cubits, and that is very significant. Now, just looking at that shroud, we'll be looking at it quite a lot. You'll see that it's a sort of sepia-coloured piece of linen with a very, very faint image on it. And I've just told you that that image is actually photo-negative. On that image, we'll be looking at it more closely, but on that image, well, there we are, that's wonderful. There is the face of Jesus in, I'm saying Jesus, I believe that's Jesus. There is the face of Jesus in photo-negative, but you can see bright red blood coming from the head, from the top of the head. What we call the occiput is the back of the head and the top of the head. On that shroud, on that face, as I say, is photo-negative, you can see that Jesus had a beard. That has been studied very, very closely, and in fact his right eye had been severely punched, and his whole eye was very swollen, and his eye was almost shut, in fact. All over his body, actually if we can go back one slide, are scourge marks all over his body. Now, I'll be mentioning later Dr. Robert Bucklin, who is a forensic pathologist, and he said there were 129 separate lashes given by 2 separate soldiers, and each one was given by a flagrum, which itself had lots of separate little dumbbells on it. And on that shroud are scourge marks, not just on the back, as you would normally expect from a Roman scourging, but on the chest, the arms, the legs, and the back, over the whole of the body. If you look very carefully, you can see in the wrist, there's a hole in the wrist. Now that's very significant because all medieval paintings, of course they didn't have photography in the medieval times, they always display the nail through the center of the hand, not in the wrist. Now, the Romans were incredibly cruel people, and they had soldiers who did nothing else in their entire professional lives other than crucify people. The Romans crucified thousands and thousands of people. For example, after the Spartacus rebellion, they crucified 6,000 people, 6,000 slaves, over 2 or 3 days probably. But if you look at that wrist, you can see that the nail clearly goes through the wrist. This is not what a medieval forger would know. There's something else about those arms. They're too long. They're longer than they should be by about 4 inches. The reason anatomically for that is that the elbows and the wrists and the shoulders have been dislocated in Psalm 22. It says, all my bones were out of joint. There's a great deal more about that shroud, and we'll come to it. But let's just move on to the next picture. If we go on again. That was the face of Jesus. And the next one is Secundo Pia, who was an amateur photographer, but a very keen one. And in 1898, he had permission to take a picture of the whole shroud and also the face of the shroud. And this actually is what he found in the next picture. We've already seen the next picture, but he was actually stunned when he took a photographic plate, which was a large plate, actually. It was about the size of a picture on your wall. And this is what he saw. And of course, that meant a lot more to him. He could see much more detail than the rather blurred outlines of a photo negative on the original shroud. So this caused a worldwide stir. Nobody had seen this image before. Photography had only been discovered in that century. So this is an early photograph. So I want to show you now about photopositive and photonegative. Now, I've purposely chosen Robert Louis Stevenson, who you've probably heard of. On the left is a photonegative image, and on the right is a photopositive image. Now, most people nowadays are not familiar with photonegative and photopositive. But I'm actually very old. And when I was a teenager, we had little box cameras called Kodak, and we put a film in them and took them off to the chemist. And the next day, we would get back a series of prints, as you see on the right. When I first started doing a little bit of, in my case, very amateur photography, they were in black and white, but they actually later started doing color ones. So I was familiar with the image on the right, but you also got some negatives with you, and they were like the ones on the image on the left. And as you can see, the light and the dark is reversed. So the Shroud of Turin, actually in Turin Cathedral, is a photonegative. Which brings me back to the same question, is how on earth could Leonardo da Vinci, who's possibly the cleverest scientist of medieval times that we know about, how on earth could he have produced a photonegative image like the one on the left of a crucified man 400 years before photography was discovered? I don't think so. So let's look at the next picture. So what we saw is the shroud, and we can look at the, if we can see the shroud again, there we are. There we have the shroud, and you can see better now. On the right-hand side, you can see the photonegative, and on the left side, you can see the photopositive as taken by Secundo Pia in 1898. And I want you to look now at a white mark on the right chest wall. That is a mark caused by a Roman spear put between the 5th and 6th right intercostal spaces to ensure that Jesus was truly dead. On the forearms, you can, on this occasion, remember that everything is reversed. So before, on the shroud, the original shroud, I showed you the wrist apparently on the left side, but that was a reverse image. In fact, you can see it on the right-hand photonegative image of the shroud. The nail in the wrist appears on the left side, but actually that's the right wrist because it appears on the left side. But if you look at the photopositive on the left-hand side, sorry, the photo, getting muddled up myself now. On the photopositive, you can see the blood in photonegative there on the wrist. But what I want to draw your attention to is blood marks flowing down the forearm, in this case flowing up the forearm. And that means that this person died with his arms outstretched in a position about 35 degrees from the horizontal. And the position most commonly thought of course, to fit with that would be crucifixion. Can you see, Birgit, what I'm talking about? The image of the wrist on the left, the wrist mark, and the flow of blood tracking up the forearms.
I can, and what's really striking me is just the precision, these details that we know from the scriptures of the nature of Christ's death, even the torture that preceded his death, and seeing signs of that in this image on this body. I mean, the precision and the correlation is so clear. It is extraordinary. As you say, the mark through the wrist, the stripes on the back, which are consistent with the flagrums by the Romans, the blood on the arm, and the blood around his head area.
Yes.
It's extraordinary how consistent this is with the scriptural accounts.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next picture now, which is another one, very similar to the one before. And actually you can see much more clearly the scourge marks on the back. Can you see that on the right-hand side? That's the back of Jesus. You can see in photo negative there, the white, of course they're red in the original, the blood marks on the back and the legs all the way down. And by the way, at the bottom of the leg, you can see a lot of blood tracking out from both feet. So let's quickly move on to the next one. There again is that hand. I wanted you to notice something about that hand. It looks slightly like an X-ray, and that's because it is an X-ray. I'll be explaining about the X-ray photography, X-ray features of the Shroud of Turin in the 4th program. But that actually, you can actually see the images of the metacarpals there, as well as the blood. By the way, the blood is type AB, which is unusual. Only 3% of the population have type A, but it's bright red. And that is significant. The blood images have been highlighted there. That's not what you'd see in Turin, but the blood images have been highlighted. There's an awful lot of blood on that shroud, and it's all bright red because a lot of bilirubin has been released, and that happens in tortured people who have been tortured. I want to move on quickly to this really stunning image. Now, NASA discovered this in 1976, and I'll be talking a lot more about this in the 4th program. That is a 3-dimensional image of the face of Jesus Christ, in my opinion. Many people wouldn't agree with me, but that is definitely a 3-dimensional image taken from a 2-dimensional cloth, which makes it unique on planet Earth. There is no other 2-dimensional image on planet Earth which, when you put it under a special computer called a VP8 image analyzing computer developed by NASA, produces a 3-dimensional image. So, 2 things. First of all, how would Leonardo da Vinci or anybody else create an image in both photopositive and photonegative 400 years before photography was discovered, and also with 3-dimensional properties which were only discovered by NASA in 1976. And furthermore, NASA now cannot create an image like that. I'm going to say that again because it's so important. That is a nuclear collimator, a very sophisticated piece of machine, but what it's not is a 3-dimensional nuclear collimator. For the very good reason is there is no such machine on planet Earth. There is no nuclear collimator on planet Earth. In order to create a 3-dimensional image from a 2-dimensional cloth, you need a nuclear collimator. And NASA haven't got a nuclear collimator. If you gave NASA unlimited funds and gave them free access to all the technicians and scientists on planet Earth, they would not be able to create anything even approximating to a 3-dimensional image as shown in the Shroud of Turin. In other words, the Shroud of Turin has dimensionally encoded 3-dimensional properties. It is totally unique on planet Earth. And what is so important is that I believe that this image was actually scorched onto the cloth by light. Now, we're told in Scripture that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. And God is clothed in light as with a garment. We're going to be talking later on about the resurrection, about the transfiguration, when Jesus shone like the sun and the light shone through his clothes. And I believe that's what happened at the time of the resurrection. I believe at the time of the resurrection, there was a blast of light similar to the transfiguration, when the whole electromagnetic spectrum of the of light was given off, including the 7 colors of the rainbow, the visual spectrum, but including infrared, which scorched the cloth, including X-rays, which cause X-ray features on the cloth, including gamma rays, which also helped to form scorch marks on the cloth and also helped to form the X-rays. I think this artifact is totally supernatural. NASA can't create this image. That, by the way, is not the Shroud of Turin. An artist has created that image from the photograph taken by Secundo Pio in 1998. Possibly that's what Jesus looked like in real life. The answer is we don't know. What I do know is that that image is amazing. Birgit, what do you think?
It is absolutely amazing, and I'm just taking on board the point that you made, that this image is being read by 3D imaging technology, which is impossible for a painting. I mean,
yes.
It is incredible to actually see that three-dimensional image of Christ's face. It's extraordinary. There we are, there's a 3D image.
And nobody can do it now. See, they say it's a fraud, but they can't do it. So my challenge is, okay, you believe it's a fraud, tell me, either go away and produce something even approximating to the Shroud of Turin, or tell me how it can possibly be done, given all the technology available worldwide today.
Well, I'm just excited by this point that you're going to come to in our upcoming programs about how you believe this image was actually seared on through this burst of radiation, which is consistent with what happened at Christ's resurrection. It's an extraordinary thought that through the ultraviolet light, that radiation, it just seared in this impression. So I'm very much looking forward to that. But Richard, I guess as we're discussing this, it's always good to bring it home to this point about what is the significance for us devotionally. So we're considering the Shroud of Turin, and what does that mean for us in our Christian lives and our love for God?
Christians do not need the Shroud of Turin. I was a Christian many years before I discovered the Shroud of Turin. But it's very fascinating.
It really is. Now, Richard, it has been amazing to begin our 4-part series with this question, what is the Shroud of Turin? So it's really helped to give us some understanding about what this linen artifact is. In the next program, we're going to be talking about is there biblical references to the shroud? So I'm very much looking forward to that. Do contact us with your comments, your feedback, and your encouragement at tothepointrevelationtv.com. And in the meantime, it's been lovely to be with you. Bye-bye.